Azir, the Emperor of the Sands. Long ago, hundreds of dozens of years ago, there happened to be the last Shuriman emperor by the name of Azir. He was but a mere mortal, with the ego of a god, and right as he had all the power, even more than any one ruler ever needed, it all crumbled to dust. From, you guessed it, the old classic murder and betrayal combo pack. After all these years, though, he's back, baby. He's no longer just a squishy mortal like the rest of us. He got himself all reborn as an ascended, packing quite the punch. And he dredged up his ruined empire from under all those grains of sand, bent by hell to bring Shurima back to its former incredible shininess. Back in his heyday, Shurima was the best and the biggest empire. Lots of farmland, really something to see. And it was all because of the sun disk's magic power of suns, blessings, and whatnot. See, that disk also was responsible for cranking out Ascended, which would lead all the armies in that kingdom and keep the many city-states in line. The cherry on top was an emperor that, well, not sure he understood the meaning of enough, 'cause he always wanted more and more and more and more. At that time, Azir was the last in a long line of sons for the throne. Plus, his dad didn't really like him. He'd never have a chance to be the head honcho emperor. His best bet would to become some holy guy or be placed in charge of some region way out in the boonies. He was a slight-framed boy who'd spend most of his time wandering Nazis's great library. He really wasn't into Renekton's fight training. One day, just another day of moseying around the library, Azir met another boy, this one a slave. That slave boy was there all the time, sifting through texts for his master. And what do you know? They became buddies. Shurima had this pesky law that made it so slaves couldn't have names. But Azir named his bud Zerath, meaning one who shares. Azir decided that Zerath would be his slave from then on, always keeping the little secret of Zerath actually having a name. Those two loved learning about Shurima's illustrious past, especially all about the Empire's ascended heroes. Every year, Azir, all them brothers, Renekton, and his dad Emperor would take a trek around the Empire to take stock of the going-ons. The royal convoy decided to overnight at a popular desert oasis, which gave Azir and Zerath ample time to sneak away and document the twinkling stars on their own maps, so that they could compare with what they saw with the great library's records. But as they were drawing up pictures of the heavens, the royal caravan was neck-deep in being assassinated by assassins. One of those assassins found Azir, and right about as he was going to do what an assassin does best, assassinate, Zerath hopped on his back like a spider monkey. In the scuffle, Azir was somehow able to get hold of the assassin's assassinating dagger and assassinated the assassin by jabbing him in the throat. Snatching up the dead assassin's sword, Azir hustled on back to camp, but as he got there, everything that happened already did. Renekton killed off all those assassins, even protecting the Emperor, but, well, all his brothers were dead. He told his dad Emperor that Zerath had saved his life and that he deserved a pat on the back, but the Emperor didn't care. In his eyes, slaves didn't have rights, nor did they matter for anything. Azir made the promise to Zerath that one day along the road they would be regarded as brothers. Azir was a mere 15-year-old, and he was the very next guy what would be emperor now. His dad Emperor started killing off whoever he thought had anything to do with offing his sons. It started off reasonable-ish, but, well, paranoia is always a great excuse for killing off anyone that looks at you funny. This all happened over the course of a few years, and Azir was living on the edge there for a bit. His dad despised him, thinking Azir should have died instead of all those other more favorable sons, and the queen still had a shot at making a new heir. Because of the assassination attempt, Azir took to training with Renekton. He really didn't know the firstest thing about fight-making, but good old Renekton taught him well. Battle tactics, how to lead, how to swing a pointy weapon to kill, you know how it goes. Azir designated Xerath as his right hand, telling him to go outwards to learn about everyone and everything he could. Azir's safety net was that the queen was never able to have another kid survive to being born. A lot of folks thought that Azir had done some sort of curse magic. He had a lot to gain if there were no competing kids to his claim, but he of course denied it, often killing off a few of his naysayers here and there, just to make a point. Finally, the queen had a beautiful, robust baby boy, but then a massive storm rolled in, lightning zapped the palace, and turned sparking a fire that killed off the queen and her newborn. The official story was that the emperor was so sad that he killed himself after learning what happened, but there were gossipy whispers about how the palace fire also got him too. As taken aback as Azir was, it was his turn to be the emperor, so him and Xerath were now in charge of the entire kingdom. In the following 10 years, he conquered new territories, made Shurima bigger and better, and was said to be harsh, but fair. He put some rules into place that slaves were to be treated better than before, secretly plotting to free them all, to put an end to the eons they spent in shackles. He even kept those ideas from Xerath, because, you couldn't have Xerath knowing what he was up to. After all, slaves are the ones who built the whole damn kingdom, and everybody had a hand in the pot. It really wasn't something that could be abolished in a hurry. Best not to let everyone know he was jonesing for that kind of change, and he couldn't free Xerath without freeing all slaves. Howdy doody was Xerath good at his job, shielding Azir from all sorts of political riff-raffy nonsense, always giving good advice when asked. Many a kid did Azir have, a few from marriage, a couple from nighttime rendezvous, and even some from slaves. Xerath acted as Azir's personal cheerleader for the dream of making Shurima the most mighty of all empires that was ever, grand enough to even lead the whole world. And, according to Xerath, the best way to do that was to become a godlike, immortal ascended. Shurima was at the height of its prowess when the proclamation that Emperor Azir would undertake the ritual ascension rang out. He'd be boosted up there with the likes of Renekton, Nasus, and all those other venerated ascended. A good chunk of his peoples weren't fans of him jumping the line. The ritual was meant for real, patriotic oldies, folks who had spent their lives bettering Shurima that were knocking on death's door. Furthermore, it wasn't up to a big-headed emperor to make those kinds of decisions. The Sun Priests were the ones who chose who to raise up, but Azir's all-encompassing ego blew past any naysayers, because anyone that challenged him would most definitely find themselves not alive. When it came round for Azir to become all godlike, everyone was there. So many warriors and so many more of his people all there to witness the momentous occasion. Xerath had sent off Nasus and Renekton to go handle some empirely issue, so unfortunately they couldn't make it to the party. Azir kept the show going, although, truth be told, he was a little bummed they weren't going to show. He walked right up to the sun disk, and right before the ritual started, he dropped the casual, "Hey Xerath, you're free now." And not just you, but all slaves. His jaw agape, Xerath didn't know what to say. Azir gave him a big ol' hug. Finally, they were brothers forever, just like he promised, back when they weren't. With that, Azir went back to the ritual process of becoming ascended, the sun disk focusing the blinding power of the sun. Little did Azir know, though, that Xerath wasn't just doing some light book reading on the side. He was learning all about dark magic. And while he did, he grew to hate Azir for keeping him bound as a slave. At the most critical part of the ritual, Xerath zapped Azir using his secret till now magical abilities. Azir was vaporized instantly. There was a little circle that you're supposed to stay in at all times, and he went outside of the ring, so Zerath hopped into that circle and started to absorb all that sunfire. Zerath should have spent less time fooling around with the dark arts and more time learning about how that ritual worked, 'cause everything went sideways. There was a gigantic explosion. It shrapneled outward, destroying the entirety of Shurima. Everyone died, and whatever was left of the city was engulfed in a sea of sand. And the sun disk that made it all possible after taking centuries to construct, it sunk deep down too. All because two guys didn't want to talk about their real feelings. Nothing was left of all that ambition but the screeches of the dead and ruined buildings. In the vast nothingness of the beyond, Azir floated. Last thing he remembered was getting toasted, unawares of what happened to his desert kingdom. And he drifted there for at least a couple thousand years, until a little dribble of blood from his very last descendant dripped onto the site of his burning, which was the exact catalyst to bring him back from being dead. He wasn't all the way there, mostly some dust clinging together from the glue of his never-ending willpower. Azir slowly began to reform back to normal. He bumbled his way through the remnants of his super empire and bumped into some lady that had an assassinating knife jabbed in her back. No doubt the work of some good-for-something assassin. Azir recognized her as a far-off, distant relative. She was his kin, and in that moment he forgot all about his sweaty dreams of world conquest and empire building. He picked her up and took her to a place that used to be known as the Oasis of the Dawn. 'Twas nothing but dried earth now, but as he hoisted her through there, water sprang in a magic watery way. Azir dunked her in that water, and after cleaning away all the blood, the water healed her up. The only thing left was a scar where the assassinating stabber had been. That act of 16th cousin water dipping met the bare minimum needed for Shurima to blast him with some fiery magic that made him the ascended god emperor he had failed to achieve thousands of years ago. All the sun power concentrated into giving him that bird-like appearance we all know today, as well as granting him the ability to shuffle around sand however he liked. Azir then blew all the sand away, revealing the rest of his sunken city. Then, get this, he lifted it up, including the sun disk, and that healy water worked its way around, setting it all back up to the way it was before. Azir also had the ability to look into the past by making the sands show him what exactly took place when the city blew up. Sandy ghosts of his long-gone peoples gave him a glimpse of what happened after he got fried. He was flabbergasted by Zerath's betrayal. He cried sandy tears as his family was exterminated, and pouty was he when he saw all the rest of his empire crumble to dust. Then he finally understood what was going on, why Zerath had did the deed. And since now Azir was ascended, he could use his special ascendy powers to tell that Zerath was still out there too. So Azir used his powers to not build some cool sandcastles like a normal person, but to raise up a scary sand warrior army, swearing to take back everything and make Shurima great again.